a lot of people are still boggled by magic, even adults. We're boggled by magic because
That's
it's
funny.
like it brings us outside of our reality. Like, hey, how can this person levitate? How can this person be cut in half and come back together?
Can't explain it.
Right. We're trying to make sense of it because it's not real. Like, it's not humanly
Not
possible.
reality. We're not the
It's not
reality.
reality. So basically what magic is just uh fighting that reality,
Yeah.
fighting what's possible in our reality, trying to make us think that there's more. Welcome back to the Out of the Box podcast, where Steele and I, Jose, your host, get to talk about outside of the box ideas. Today, we're going to be talking about the difference between illusions and hallucinations, right? A lot of people might think that they're the same, but there's actually a difference. And so today we're going to be delving into that. But before we get started, we want to just invite you guys to subscribe to our channel. This is a channel that is focused on providing amazing ideas, bringing in guests from different subjects. We're really excited to bring in more guests here with us. And so if you want to support us along the way and join us in this journey of finding truth and searching for truth, please subscribe. And also along the way, if you like anything that we mentioned, please feel free to leave us a time mark down below and also let us know what you thought of the video. So without further ado, Steele, give us a head start. Just what is the definition of a hallucination versus an illusion?
Yeah. So like a lot of people actually don't know about illusions. They don't know. They've never heard of. I mean, we've all heard about an illusion, like a magic trick, is what comes to mind.
Mm-hmm.
And that's technically, I guess you could argue, is true. So like first off, a hallucination is something that a person cannot necessarily control, and they're seeing it like vividly and for a certain amount of time. Like once it's like past, I mean, I'm just kind of making this up, like a get rough guess here. Like I would say if it's past like 10 seconds or like a minute, then you're probably talking about a hallucination, and you're seeing it vividly and you're double looking and it's still there, then that's probably a hallucination that your brain is creating, and the illusion is something that everyone experiences. So hallucinations are delegated to like people with like psychosis or other mental disorders that cause hallucinations, or substances like LSD or acid and all that stuff, DMT. Um, Whereas like illusions are something that everyone can experience, and everyone has probably experienced at least several times in their life, especially when you're younger. So like for example, hypnagogic hallucinations or hypnopompic hallucinations when you're going to sleep or waking up, like little like flash like light things. When people see dots, I would see like dots in the early morning. And stuff like, for example, like I don't know if you've ever been in your bedroom when you were a kid and in the dark and you thought you saw something, but it actually was something else. Like you thought you
Yeah,
saw
like
a
a
figure.
scarf or was a
Exactly.
hoodie.
So that's an illusion. Yeah, that's all it is. And so like that's why I say it could be magic tricks, could technically be an illusion, because basically an illusion is your mind seeing something visual that you think is real, but then you do a double take and you realize it's not real. So it's not, it doesn't last as long, and it's not real kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So, what would you would say that maybe a hallucination is actually a something that lasts a little bit longer, and also it's something that's more of a chemical reaction in the brain that causes someone to see something that's technically not there as well.
Exactly. I think that's, you just summed up the pretty much the key differences right there. Because like illusions, it's not really like a brain chemical imbalance. It's just like it kind of reveals the limitations of our vision and of the way our brain perceives reality. We've talked a lot in the past about like the five senses and consciousness and how complicated it all is. The same thing with illusions. Like that's why they happen, is because our vision is like, not many people maybe realize like our vision is not actually complete. Our brain fills in gaps. So I think, like, to get to kind of explain that a little bit, like but about the blind spot, you know
In terms of of our vision, or blind spot in terms of like in general, like we all have like a
Oh
blind spot in our.
yeah, perception. No, yeah, I mean vision. Yeah,
Okay.
you know about that? Like,
Well, I've heard of cases, and I know like personally, my mom, she says that sometimes there's like a part in her vision that she just can't see. It's like a dot or something like that.
oh really? That's interesting.
Mm.
Yeah, I wonder what that is, because like, because our blind spot is, it's basically like where the optic nerve leaves our eye and goes to the brain, and so there's like a tiny little hole there in the back of our eyes, and that's why the blind spot exists. And we can, I think there's like ways you can kind of see it by doing the finger trick, seeing the floating finger, or like there's optical illusions online on paper that you can try it out on that reveals the blind spot. And so basically the blind spot, like there's a gap in our vision, like a small spot in the center of our vision that's always there, but our brain fills in the gap. So like think about that for a second, what that means. That means everything we're seeing right now, there's technically this little thing in the middle that's not actually real. It's our brain hallucinating, feeling like seeing an illusion, like filling in a gap, and it's like just a mental projection from our brain. It's not actually real, you know.
Yeah.
Pretty weird. So I wonder if that's what illusions are. That's what I'm getting at. You know, that
Yeah.
the brain
Yeah,
feels.
like you said, filling in the gaps. And I think it's also part of our survival mechanism, right? We're so I mean, if we have this ancient brain, right, that has evolved in different ways, and it's also supposed to protect us from harm, right? And so whenever it's night, like you said, you see a scarf that looks like a monster, though the brain is filling in that gap. And so it's like, is it or is it not? I and it rather put you in a situation of fight or flight than to discount it as like, oh, it's
That
nothing,
makes sense. Yeah.
right? And so it's almost like protecting you and saying like, hey, watch out for that could potentially be harmful, right?
Yeah, and
And
it can.
so I think our brain is meant to keep us alive, right? It warns us of things that could potentially happen, and so that's why it's protecting ourselves by filling in the gaps, right?
Yeah, and
And I think we do that in different senses, right? I think like even subconsciously with different things. So I think that essentially could create an illusion of something that's not really there. And I think maybe even um illusions could not only be physical, like things that we see, but we could be we could have an illusion of the personality of someone, or an illusion of the reality um, of a situation, right? And so we
perceptually.
could be under an illusion, right, that the person that we're talking to is trustworthy, for example, or is harmful. And so sometimes our mind fills in the gaps from situations of things that have happened in the past. And so if a person reacts and says a word that triggers something from the past, you automatically associate them with something that's negative. For example, they did this study, and I recently heard about it, where they had a group of people go to a mall, and they all had a coffee in their hand, and they go up to a person and they say, hey, can you hold my coffee? And before the person can agree or disagree, they hold the coffee, and the other person checks their phone, uh, acts like if they're gonna send a message, puts it back in their phone. They take the coffee and they say thank you, and they keep walking, right? So they have a group of people, other people, different people that are not the coffee person, come like 20 minutes later, and they find these people who they interacted with, and they ask them to read a passage, right, of a character. And they tell them like, hey, if you don't mind reading these 3 sentences, and just let me know what you think of this character, right? Do you think that they're good? Do you think that they're bad? Um, and so what was so interesting was that the coffee that these people gave to hold for for these people, half of them had ice cold coffee, the other half had warm coffee, right? And when these people were reading the sentences, right? Those people, the majority, like 80%, 75, 80% of the people who had cold coffee, right? They held cold coffee in their hand, said that the person, the character of the story that they were reading, right? Three sentences, was a very cold, distant, person, right? Those people who had the hot coffee said the person was warm, caring. And so it just makes me think like, whoa, this aspect of illusion can happen at a subconscious level, that not only are we seeing an illusion physically, but we're seeing an illusion mentally, almost to the point where one could say it's almost like a manipulation, right? But if we're going on a day-to-day basis, just living out our lives, potentially there could be more illusions than that we think we see,
We don't
right?
realize we're just going through life. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, and that's
Do you
perfect.
ever have those moments where like you become conscious of what's going on, and it almost feels so surreal that you have a person right in front of you, and you just, for
Yeah, sometimes
now,
you
like
start
you've
over.
been walking with them for the longest time, and you just realize that they're there, like
Yeah,
you
you like
see
bring yourself
fully.
to it. Yeah, you kind of bring yourself. It's almost like mindfulness. Making
Mm,
yourself aware of all your surroundings. And I used to do that quite a bit in college and just pay attention to everything going on in a busy room, each little tiny detail that we just don't always focus on. And it becomes really surreal. And like you said, and you start questioning it. And like it becomes almost overwhelming because our perception is designed to be selective to not be overwhelming. But to go back to that example you gave earlier about the scarf turning into a monster, that doesn't come from nothing, right? I mean, the idea that it's a monster doesn't just come out of thin air. You know, you're exposed to monsters growing up in children's books and TV media, and so your brain takes that in and interprets that as a danger because monsters are usually depicted as dangerous in dangerous ways with the stereotypical fangs and the teeth. And I would even say, was that an archetype or a symbol of nature that's been passed on from generation to generation for years? And so our brains just automatically associate sharp things like fangs, horns with danger, like snakes, for example. Snakes have fangs. Animals that are dangerous tend to have horns or sharp things, stingers. And so like that exposure to those monsters growing up and all those images, and that's where that comes from. It comes from stimuli in the environment, internalized into memories. And then when you see a scarf or something in your room in the dark, well, that looks like one of these things that you were exposed to, and so it forms that illusion. So like I was just pointing out, these illusions don't just come out of nowhere. They're based on memories and what we've seen in the past. Um, so yeah, I just think that's interesting. And what you said about perception being affected by that, we can have perceptual illusions like psychologically too, like you said with that experiment example, like it affected the way they perceive something.
yeah.
That's
So
like
it was almost like an illusion, but they didn't realize that it was an illusion,
just
you
like I don't know
know?
if you heard about like the gorilla suit guy in a room and no one notices until they
Yeah, yeah. Yeah,
so
where they have like a couple dancers or something like that.
yeah,
And he like literally passes right in front of everyone,
they don't even
but you
mean.
just never notice it.
Well, and what's really cool is, we talked about the fourth dimension and how I know this sounds like it has nothing to do with it, but trust me, we're we're in a third dimension and we perceive everything in 2D, right? Because we just see things in 2D, and the shadows and light changes give us the illusion that it's 3D. And so right now I'm looking at you and I'm looking at this computer and the desk and everything, and it's 2D. Like I'm seeing it in 2D, but the shadows give it the illusion of 3D. And not only that, it's not like I'm sitting here thinking, oh, well, my computer has no back to it. It has no cables behind it. I'm not looking at you, Jose, and thinking that yeah, you don't have a back of your head and a back of your shirt and a back of your neck.
Mm,
I can I'm filling in those gaps too mentally. Like
yeah.
I don't see you as a 2D object right now. I know what the other side of you looks like without even seeing it. And we do that all the time too.
Yeah, we fill in the gaps of things that we cannot see,
The other side of it.
but we just, we know that they're there,
Yeah,
right?
like imagine if I genuinely believe that there is a blue cube in this filing cabinet right now. And then imagine what would happen if I opened it and was shocked. I was like, wait, I thought there was a blue cube in here. It seemed like I filled in the gap. I thought it was really there, you know? Like,
Mm.
it's
Yeah,
so
it's almost like when we forget to pack something for a field trip, or you
yeah,
know, you think, oh yes, I have everything
I know it's
there that I need. And then you're surprised when you open the box and it's not there,
have
and
you
it's
ever
like,
had that before? You ever done that before? Where
yeah,
you're about
yeah,
to open something and you're already imagining what's inside it and you know what it's gonna look like, and then it's
and
not.
where it's located, like on what side.
Yeah, all the
Yeah,
details. So that's just amazing. Like our brain is so good at like doing that, filling in the gaps. It's pretty
yeah.
cool. Like I never really thought about it like that. Yeah.
I guess because it has like previous knowledge or association with reality, right? So we understand what reality is, and so whenever we see something, we try to make an association to something that we've seen in the past, so to make sense of the situation, right? To understand what's going on, right? And so, for example, in the case of seeing a scarf as a monster, we're trying to make sense of what we see, right? Of course, our thoughts could be mistaken, our perception could be mistaken, but we're trying to make sense of it. And I think as we are, when we're younger, you know we tend to see more things just because our imagination still hasn't filled in those gaps, so it doesn't know what it is, right? And we start to imagine and try to make sense of the situation because we still haven't completely formed our understanding of the world, or what is
Yeah, I never
real,
thought.
what is reality,
Yeah, I never.
right? And so in a way, our mind is trying to make sense of situations, and I think we still do that at a subconscious level every single day. We're trying to make sense of a situation. um we're trying to we're trying to guess how long it's going to take us from one place to another. And so we have GPS where it gives us a rough understanding of how much time it will take, but we can anticipate an accident happening along the way, right? We just we just trust that cars are going where they should. We're trusting that everyone's driving safely, right? um so those are things that we trust in the system, right? We have systems within systems that we trust, right? We know that when we go to HEB, we can pick out whatever we want, and there's going to be a cashier, or
Yeah,
we
we
can
know those
self check it out, right?
expectations too. You're right.
Yeah. So, but if something were to change, maybe it could cause some sort of illusion where we're trying to make some sense of it at the same time that it changed. I think that's why a lot of people are still boggled by magic. Even adults. We're boggled by magic because
Hard to
it's
explain.
like it brings us outside of our reality. Like, hey, how can this person levitate? How can this person be cut in half and come back together?
Can't explain it.
Right. We're trying to make sense of it because it's not real. Like, it's not humanly
Not
possible.
reality. We're not the
It's not
reality.
reality. So basically what magic is just uh fighting that reality,
Yeah.
fighting what's possible in our reality, try to make us think that there's more, which could be good, which could there could be more, that we still don't understand. But it battles that sense of reality, and I think that's why it causes so much fascination, because it's like, how could this happen? This does not make sense with natural laws, with gravity, with different
brain,
things.
our
So
brain can't fill in the gap in those situations, and so we're left confused.
exactly.
And so, yeah, I mean, definitely.
Yeah.
What,
So
was up?
in terms of hallucinations, you know what made you want to like debate both sides? Like, is there something
Um,
that
yeah, I mean, it was really just about like, it's just really like people hear about hallucinations, and a lot of people know about that. But I didn't even know about illusions until I studied psychology. I didn't even know illusions was a thing, that a description of this thing that we have all experienced our whole lives, you know? And I think a lot of people maybe confuse them with each other, or a lot of people just aren't even aware of what illusions are. That this seeing something in your bedroom and you realize it's actually just a pile of clothes. You know, I think that was kind of the primary kind of thing right there. Is just like, we know what hallucinations are, so let's compare that to illusions, and then what are illusions, and then why does this happen? Why do illusions happen?
yeah.
What's the
Do you
difference?
think near death experiences could potentially be an illusion, a hallucination, or reality?
Well, we've talked about that before, and I think and I would refer people to that podcast because, yeah, I mean, like, I don't think it is. I don't think the evidence is there to support that, because if it's true that the brain is truly dead and there's no neurons firing, and someone still experiences something after death, I'm not really sure how you can explain that as a hallucination, because the brain is what produces hallucinations and
Hallucinations.
illusions. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, because the brain is what puts us back into reality in this three-dimensional world, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so, have you ever, what you call it? Have you ever, like, you ever watched like a scary movie, and then like a horror movie or something, and all of a sudden you're like hyper vigilant, and like you think you see things, and has that ever happened before?
Yeah, I mean, you put yourself into the character of the movie, and you almost feel like the character. Like you feel like the reality within the movie is now the reality in the world,
Yeah, like
and
now
so
you're
it's
extra cautious, like.
yeah,
So yeah, I mean, that's an example. Like, that's putting something in our brain that wasn't there before, and then it's making us think and expect. I think expectations maybe have to do with it, expecting a monster to be around the corner. And then, like, if you go to bed in a dark room with your eyes open after watching a horror movie, I feel like the chances of you seeing monsters and inanimate objects and random things in the room is more likely to happen, because your brain's like in that mindset of horror. It's in the mindset of expecting to see something. So I wonder if
mm,
expecting to see something can also make illusions happen, like
yeah,
like in the dark, if I'm looking in the dark, like,
mm,
you know.
yeah. Can people uh have hallucinations without having necessarily like a like something
Yeah,
that is input into the body?
right, without drugs, or like or
Yeah,
psycho.
without external like
Yeah.
aspects.
Well, and that's a good tie-in to the next thing I wanted to talk about, which is sensory deprivation. You ever heard about those sensory deprivation tanks before?
Oh, where you can't feel like your body or something like that?
Yeah, like they have salt water in them. It's warm. It's like room temperature. You float, and it's like a tank that's pitch black, soundproof. So like, there's no sound, there's no vision, and like feeling your sensation is taken away because you're floating. And so the question, to answer your question, and those sensory deprivation tanks, after about, I don't know, like 30 minutes or an hour, people start hallucinating. Perfectly normal, healthy people like start seeing things that aren't there. I think it's because, like, it goes back to the main thing we're talking about, is the brain starts filling in the gaps. There's no stimuli, there's no sensory. It's sensory deprivation. So like,
Mm.
so the brain needs something, so it fills in the gap.
So is it a hallucination or an illusion?
Yeah, right. What is it? That's a good question. I don't know. Like,
Yeah. So does the so I'm guessing the brain needs the body in order to make Yeah, it makes sense. It needs the body's sensations to make sense of the world,
Yeah, we
right?
depend on that's our
The
reality.
the air, the smell, the what you hear, you know, we hear a scratch in the window and then we see the scarf and then it's like, oh, it's a monster,
Yeah,
right? We see that in Monsters Inc., right? Like, they first like create rumbling sound and then, they touch something in the room and then they scare the kid,
yeah,
right? So almost like, we're trying to make sense of all these things. So we're relying on different things to make sense of the world. So if we remove all our senses, it's almost like the brain doesn't know what to do, and so it starts almost to create its own reality. I mean, I wonder if that's what happens when we sleep, you know
yeah. That's why
or it could
dreams. Is
could
that
be
why?
different, right? We turn off all our sensory mechanisms and then our brain just starts to create stories
Maybe that's.
that that are related to the reality that we're living.
And it's funny, like this wouldn't happen if we hadn't lived like on this planet in a certain number of years. What I mean by that is like if you have a clean slate before birth or like the first day of after you're born, I don't know if I wonder if the brain would still really do that because I feel like maybe with sensory deprivation, we're deprived of the five senses that we've been used to our whole lives, memories, experiences with all the five senses. That's all we know. And that's all our brain has been conditioned to know. So when you take that all away suddenly, I'm wondering if the brain fills in the gaps based upon prior experiences with the five senses, and so yeah, that's weird to think about.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned like about babies, like how do they experience the world? Do they have hallucinations as well?
Yeah, I think
Whenever they're babies and trying to make sense of the world, they're new to using their senses, and so I'm guessing they're trying to fill in the gaps of life,
mm,
and I wonder if babies, ever have hallucinations when they're little, because they still don't know how to fully use their their five senses, right? So their brain is trying to fill in gaps, um, as much as possible. So I
yeah.
wonder if that's what causes some babies to cry.
Yeah, I'm seeing some articles say that hallucinations in children's are sometimes happen. Hmm. I could have sworn,
Because some kids say, "Oh, I have my best friend," and they see their best friend.
right?
Are they seeing ghosts? Are they seeing, is that a hallucination? Um, or is it an illusion?
Yeah, it's saying some children have it, but it's normal. But they say it's like stress or something. But I could have sworn I read that in lifespan development somewhere that when the brain's developing during infancy, that there's like hallucination stuff. But I don't know, maybe not. I'd have to look more into it. But did you know speaking of which, there's another thing where people go in this soundproof room where there's no sound at all. And after a while, they start hearing things they don't normally hear. Like they start hearing their own heartbeat and their breathing. And some people claim to start hearing the blood move through their blood vessels.
Wow.
So it's like it's like the brain needs sensation. So it starts focusing more deeply,
Yeah,
internalizing the sensation. I don't know.
to make sense of the world,
Yeah, why
right?
does the brain do that?
I think it's because we've been so reliant on different senses that when it's missing, we almost have like a phantom feeling of it. It's almost like I was talking to someone yesterday, and they said that they used to have long hair, and when they cut it short, they still kept on trying to flip their hair,
Yeah, right.
because they thought it was there. So it's almost like a phantom aspect of like phantom hair, right? Maybe they're experiencing phantom hearing, right? Where they're so used to hearing, that whenever it's taken away, they almost try to make sense of it. They need hearing in order to make sense of the world.
Right.
I think it would be different for somebody that's born deaf. you know, they've used other senses and amplified other senses to make up for their loss of hearing. And so for them, not to hear is not really a problem, right? Because they haven't been used to hearing. And so I'm sure,
Yeah.
we almost get a phantom hearing problem where,
I think I'm wondering if it's more about like with that specific example of going into the soundproof room. You know how blind people have enhanced hearing because they just focus more on it, I guess. And so I'm wondering if in the room we're used to all this auditory stimuli all the time. Like my air conditioner, you, this computer, myself talking, everything. Whereas when you go into a soundproof room, you don't have any of that. All of that auditory stimuli is taken away that's usually there. And so I think I'm wondering if it's because the brain then starts focusing on what's left. And the only sounds that could be left is the heartbeat and the blood vessels and all the body sounds. So I wonder if that's why. So the brain doesn't have any other stimuli to go off of. So it's easier for the brain to focus on other what's left over. And so that, like selective perception, we can't perceive everything at once. So we tune things out. So we're probably tuning out our body sounds right now, but maybe we can still hear them on some level. So I think taking away all the others auditory stuff then lets them do that maybe. But what you talked about with phantom stuff, the somatosensory cortex is involved in that because the somatosensory cortex is what maps out all of the sensation of our whole body. And so when you talked about phantom hair, there's a thing called phantom limbs and phantom limb pain. People have their arms amputated, their legs amputated, and they can still feel them. You're like, what does that mean? Well, there's theories in science and tests that show it's a somatosensory cortex kind of not recognizing that the limb missing is not there anymore. The somatosensory cortex that maps all of our sensation thinks the arm is still there, so it still feels it there. So like phantom limb pain, and also they put their hand in a mirror and it cures the phantom limb pain because then they trick their brain into thinking they're moving the hand that was amputated, and then it makes a change in the somatosensory cortex. And so they think that there's another interesting thing there is like people with a limb cut off report feeling when they're touched on their face or something like that, they'll feel parts of the limb that was missing but on their face, and it's like really confusing. And they think it's because the wires are getting crossed in the somatosensory cortex, because I think it's something like the face is close to the arm on the somatosensory cortex, so the brain is trying to I guess figure it out and compensate for the missing limb, so then the wires of sensation get crossed. And so that's pretty weird if you ask me.
wow.
Really
So
weird.
you start feeling your hand in your mouth or in your eye,
Something like that, yeah. It's like
or
right.
like caressing like your face
Yeah, like there's
almost.
certain areas of the face, I think they say that when you touch it, you feel it on the missing limb. Yeah. So I
Wow.
mean, yeah, I mean, like when you brought up the phantom hair, like that's what that brought up to me because
And in itself, I think it's an illusion,
I
right?
was just gonna say it's an illusion. It is because
Yeah.
obviously we know the limb isn't there, but we still feel it. They still feel it there. That's an illusion, and that ties into the same thing we've been saying. The brain's filling in gaps. I think. Yeah. I don't know.
Wow.
It's weird.
Yeah, I think it brings us into a deeper understanding of illusions being filling in gaps of reality, and hallucinations is more like a chemical imbalance that creates, you know, um, another reality within the reality.
Yeah. Exactly. Exactly. I think that's about right. It seems like illusions are just filling in gaps. The brain trying to figure out. Like, have you ever done weird stuff with your eyes before, where like you close one eye and your nose almost looks like it's see through, or something looks see through, but then when you do this, it's not. Have you ever done that? Like you're laying on a bed and there's like something in front of you, but when you close your eye, you can see past it, kind of, but like it changes.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Like you see a different like area, right? Because the eyes are located in different parts, right? So when you close one eye, you see
Yeah.
like a certain amount, and then when you see the other eye, you see a certain amount, but together you see the whole peripheral
I don't
vision.
know if this happens to you too, but like if you try to look at your nose right now, does it kind of, you see it a little bit, but it's translucent? Like, does that happen? Like with both,
Yeah,
when you do it with both eyes? Yeah. So that doesn't make sense, right? And we know our nose isn't translucent. So there's some type of weird illusion thing going on there, right?
yeah.
It's
Or
weird.
even I don't know if you ever done the experiment where you wiggle
Oh yeah.
it so to the point where it looks like it's bending.
Well, yeah, I've done that. We'll try this too. Like when I'm doing this right now and I'm just looking at you, it looks like there's two markers in front of me, not one. Does that happen to you?
Oh yeah.
Yeah, like we know that's not true. It's because this eye is seeing it here and this eye is seeing it here and it's mixing it together. When I close one eye, it's here and I close the other, it's here. So like that's obviously not reality. That's not real. We know it's not
Mm,
real, but it's what we're seeing. Like I'm
it's an
seeing two markers.
illusion.
I know I'm seeing two markers right now, but I know there's only one. So like there's a logical part that has to like explain it, I guess.
Yeah.
I just think that's it's so fascinating and weird, and it just shows how our vision and our brain, our occipital cortex, which processes vision, is so, I don't know if I would say limited or what I would say. I don't know.
Yeah, I think in itself it's it's a little bit of both. It constrains us to the reality that's capable, right? We have a sense of what's real and from based on our previous experiences, but it also shows us what's capable, right? Because it's like, oh, if I was able to be tricked by this experiment or by this activity, then what is there more that I don't really understand, you know? And I think that's why supernatural activity is so fascinating because it's like, whoa, my body was able to heal off of this. Like, why does this happen? Right? A lot of people are now using stem cells and I'm not talking about the fetus stem cells, like they're finding a way to create stem cells that are not from fetus. Um, and so it's so interesting because it's like, whoa, our bodies can regenerate almost to the point where we regain like 1 or 2 years or more of health. And it's like, well, what is this regenerative um, health, right? Well, how does this work? And so it's so very interesting to understand all these things and
Yeah,
um
definitely.
it shows what how much the body is capable of
Yeah,
doing, right?
I think also
um
how
it's
much it.
almost like when we see a basketball player shooting hoops, it's almost like you're watching a video game. It's like so unnatural. It's like an illusion. Like you're like that's why we're attracted to magic, right? Because it takes us outside of our reality, creating a new reality of what's capable in the world, which then helps us fill in the gaps for future
Yeah,
events.
definitely. Like the things that our body's capable of that we don't even fully understand yet.
Mm,
And then when you bring epigenetics in, that's interesting.
yeah.
It's also
That's
interesting.
why I think a lot of people travel too, because they're trying to make sense of the world. So
Yeah,
when they travel, they see a new reality. They go to Germany, now they know what Germany
yeah.
looks like, how it smells
Honestly,
like, how it feels like. And so when they meet somebody from Germany, they're like, oh, they can make a better association
yeah,
of who they are or who they're meeting with. And so it's not like, oh, well, are they going to, this is, like a remark, but somebody could say like, oh, maybe they just had all they have heard about Germany is of Hitler and
right.
of the chaos. So maybe they think Germans are the same way. And so just different associations like that where we're trying to make sense of the world based on what we've learned of the world.
The media,
And so by
right?
actually being exposed to new realities or what's capable in the world, we begin to form better ways to fill in gaps
Yeah,
of things.
yeah, it gives us more to work with on that for sure. There's
Mhm.
also it's also interesting to look at brain damage in certain areas, how it affects all of those things too. Like there's certain conditions. I can't remember the names off exactly off the top of my head. I think it's agnosia. Is it agnosia? Mm. Yeah, so agnosia is brain damage where the person can no longer identify objects, sometimes people. What does that mean? So, like, you can give them an apple and they'll, like, they know what an apple is. Like, they can tell you what an apple is, they can describe it in perfect detail. But when you give the apple and show it to them in front of them visually, they can't identify what it is. And
Mm.
so that's just so strange. And then there's specific, I can't remember all the names, but there's specific parts in our brain that recognize faces that when they get damaged, like the faces become distorted and no longer make sense. There's other
Wow.
conditions of brain damage where a person will not recognize their own mother or wife or whatever, their own spouse, even though they've been married to them for years, they've been married to their spouse, but the brain damage makes it to where they can't recognize their face. And what's interesting is they can recognize the spouse's voice when they call them on the phone and they know who it is, but whenever they see their face, they don't believe it's them. I think it's called imposter syndrome. And then they believe their spouse is an imposter, pretending to be their spouse, who looks like their spouse, but isn't actually them. That's actually a from brain damage. So it's weird. And then there's
Wow.
something called what's the name for it? It's called motion blindness. What is that? I think it's aphasia.
I wonder if people with brain damage, if they have an external aspect, they take a drug that creates hallucinations, with the same hallucination happen, in the brain damaged brain than
Oh,
in a normal brain.
and then does it, project the same problem, right? From the brain damage. Emotion blindness is pretty interesting too, because I don't know how they even perceive reality, because motion blindness, they no longer are able to see objects in motion.
Well,
So it's like I think they see it like in snippets or something. Or it's so strange. Like imagine trying to cross the street when you have motion blindness and you can't see the cars. I don't know, like it's weird. Like I think it's like the those movies where it's like short shutter speed and it's just like images kind of that are spread apart. I think that's what motion blindness is like. But I don't know. Those are just some examples of how, just when a part of the brain is damaged, it affects vision and it creates illusions. Yeah, it's
very interesting.
weird. Yeah.
Nice, man. Well, do you have any last thoughts on this topic?
Um, Trying to think. So I mean, there's actually a way that you can do sensory deprivation. Um,
Hmm.
yeah.
Just on your own?
Yeah, you ever heard of the ping pong method?
No.
So basically, you cut a ping pong ball in half. It's better if it's white, but and then you tape it on your eyes, and then you put headphones on. Soundproof ones are best, and you put it on just white noise, and you basically sit there like that. And they say to shine a laser into the ping pong ball as well, or maybe like a light could work. And I've done it like twice, I think. And what happens after like 30 minutes, 20 minutes, or an hour is you start like hallucinating, or seeing illusions, I guess. So like one time, what I would see the times I did that, the first time I thought I heard stomping, like really like a giant monster stomping in the room. And my friends told me like, no, that never happened. And then the other time I did it most recently, I started seeing like white smoke. And it's so subtle at first that it's not real, obviously, but like it's so subtle that you're like, can't quite tell it's there. And then the longer you wait, then it gets stronger and stronger and you can see it more and more. So other people have seen
Well,
stuff, but yeah, so I mean that's an easy way to do sensory deprivation.
wow.
Weird,
Well, I think that's, for people who might be wanting to try that out, I think that gives a great example. And yeah, let us know if you actually do the experiment with the ping pong ball. If you have any more questions about how to do it, please feel free to let us know down below, and we will be more than welcome to help you out, walk you through the process. But we hope that you enjoyed this podcast. We really appreciate your time, and hopefully that you learned something new from the difference between illusions and hallucinations. Have you ever experienced a hallucination or an illusion? Could you relate to the ones that we mentioned today? Please let us know down below in the comment section. And also don't forget to subscribe, because we are committed to continue providing you amazing content. We're going to have future guests coming on the podcast. So we look forward to seeing you soon, and we'll talk to you soon as well. Take care.